I was drinking my morning coffee on the front porch of my house in Chattanooga, Tennessee, when I saw her marching across the street like she was leading a military invasion. The woman had that look on her face, the one that told me my peaceful Tuesday morning was about to turn into a circus I never asked to join. My name is Derek Williams, and I had just moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood 6 months ago. After 20 years in the Marine Corps, I wanted nothing more than a simple life, a decent yard to maintain, and the freedom to display my American flag without anyone giving me grief about it. The flag meant everything to me. It represented the brothers I had lost overseas, the sacrifices made by countless service members, and the values I had sworn to protect. The woman approaching my property was Linda Patterson, the president of our Homeowners Association. I had met her briefly during the move-in process, and she had seemed pleasant enough then. But the expression on her face now suggested that our second meeting would be considerably less cordial. "Mr. Williams," she called out, still about 20 feet away from my porch. Her voice had that high-pitched quality that made me think of fingernails on a chalkboard. "We need to discuss your flagpole situation immediately." I set down my coffee mug slowly, taking a moment to process what I was hearing. My flagpole situation. I had installed a regulation flagpole in my front yard, following every local ordinance and guideline to the letter. The flag itself was a standard 3 by 5 foot American flag, nothing excessive or unusual. "Good morning, Linda," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What seems to be the problem?" She reached the edge of my porch, clutching a leather-bound notebook against her chest like it was some kind of sacred text. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly in a bun that I wondered if it was affecting her ability to think clearly. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that looked like it cost more than my first car, and her makeup was applied with the precision of someone who spent far too much time worrying about appearances. "The problem, Mr. Williams, is that your flagpole violates HOA regulations. Section 14, subsection C clearly states that all external decorative elements must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee before installation." She opened her notebook and jabbed her finger at a page covered in dense text. I stood up from my chair, my 6'2" frame apparently making her take an involuntary step backward. I was not trying to intimidate her, but I was not about to sit down while someone lectured me about displaying the American flag on my own property. "Linda, with all due respect, I reviewed the HOA guidelines thoroughly before installing the flagpole. There was nothing in those documents that suggested I needed special permission to fly the American flag. Furthermore, the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 protects my right to do exactly what I am doing." Her face flushed red, and I could see a vein starting to pulse in her temple. "The act you are referring to does not give you carte blanche to ignore HOA regulations entirely. The flagpole is too tall, it is too prominent, and quite frankly, it is an eyesore that is affecting property values in this neighborhood." I felt my jaw clench. An eyesore. She was calling the American flag an eyesore. I had watched good men and women die defending that flag. I had folded it over caskets and handed it to grieving widows. And this woman, who had probably never sacrificed a single comfortable moment in her entire life, was standing on my property calling it an eyesore. The flagpole is 15 feet tall, which is well within the legal limit for residential areas in Chattanooga. It is positioned in my front yard on my property, and it is harming exactly no one. I kept my voice level, but I could feel the anger building in my chest. Linda's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Williams, I am trying to be reasonable here. The HOA board has already discussed this matter, and we have voted unanimously that the flagpole must be removed within 30 days, or you will face daily fines of $100. Unanimously, I repeated. So you had a meeting about my flagpole without bothering to inform me or invite me to present my side. She waved her hand dismissively. We do not need to inform homeowners of every board meeting. That would be highly impractical. The decision has been made, and I suggest you comply before this becomes more unpleasant than it needs to be. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that losing my temper would not help the situation. Linda, I am not removing the flagpole. If you want to pursue this, I will see you at the next official HOA meeting where I can actually defend myself in front of the entire board. Her expression shifted from angry to something almost predatory. That meeting is in 2 weeks. In the meantime, I will be documenting every day that you remain in violation. I would strongly recommend reconsidering your position, Mr. Williams. I always win these disputes. With that, she turned on her heel and marched back across the street to her own immaculate house. I watched her go, feeling a familiar sensation I had not experienced since leaving the military. The knowledge that I was about to enter a battle I had not chosen but would absolutely not back down from. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. My first was to Tom Richardson, a buddy from my unit who had also retired to Tennessee and worked as a lawyer specializing in property rights. The second was to Marcus Johnson, another veteran who ran a local advocacy group for former service members. If Linda Patterson wanted a fight over my right to display the American flag, she was about to discover that I had an entire army of brothers and sisters who would stand beside me. Tom answered on the third ring. Derek, what is going on? It is barely 8 in the morning. I explained the situation quickly, and I could practically hear him shaking his head through the phone. Yeah, I have dealt with cases like this before. The HOA is going to argue that their regulations supersede your individual rights, but they are on shaky legal ground. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act is pretty clear, and Tennessee has additional state protections for flag displays. Did she mention anything specific about why they are targeting your flagpole? She said it is too tall and too prominent, and that it is affecting property values, I replied, watching as Linda stood in her own yard, apparently on her phone as well. Tom laughed, though there was no humor in it. Property values, that is always their go-to excuse. Listen, do not take the flag down and do not pay any fines if they try to assess them. Document everything, every conversation, every letter, every email. We might need it if this goes to court. I do not want this to go to court, Tom. I just want to fly my flag in peace. I know, brother. But sometimes we do not get to choose our battles. I will start drafting a response letter to the HOA citing the relevant laws. In the meantime, reach out to Marcus. If anyone can help apply some public pressure, it is him. I thanked Tom and ended the call, then immediately dialed Marcus. He picked up instantly, his voice booming with the same energy he had always brought to everything he did. Derek Williams, how the hell are you, man? It has been too long. After exchanging brief pleasantries, I filled him in on the situation. Marcus's response was exactly what I expected. You are telling me this HOA Karen is trying to make you take down the American flag at your own house after you served 20 years? His voice rose with each question. Oh, hell no. This is exactly the kind of thing our veterans group exists to fight. When is the HOA meeting? 2 weeks from today. Perfect. I am going to make some calls. We are going to have a presence at that meeting, and I guarantee you Linda Patterson is going to regret the day she decided to mess with a Marine. Can you send me all the documentation you have? The HOA guidelines, your correspondence with them, everything. I promised to send everything over and hung up feeling slightly better about the situation. I knew Marcus. When he said he would make calls, he meant it. The man had connections throughout the veteran community in Tennessee, and he was not shy about mobilizing people when he felt a cause was just. The next few days passed in relative quiet, which should have been my first warning that something worse was brewing. On Thursday afternoon, I came home from my job at a local construction company to find a bright orange notice taped to my front door. It was an official HOA violation notice, complete with photographs of my flagpole from multiple angles. The letter informed me that I had 26 days remaining to comply with the removal order, after which fines would begin to accrue. I took pictures of the notice with my phone and immediately forwarded them to Tom and Marcus. Tom's response came within the hour, a formal letter addressed to the HOA board stating my intention to contest the violation and citing multiple legal precedents protecting my right to display the flag. He also included a warning that any fines assessed would be challenged in court, and that I would seek damages for harassment and selective enforcement if the HOA continued on their current course. Marcus's response was different. "Brother, this is about to get interesting. I have been talking to people all week. You have support you cannot even imagine. Just hold tight and do not back down." That weekend, I noticed something odd. Neighbors I had barely spoken to since moving in started stopping by. First, it was Bill Henderson from 2 houses down, a retired Army sergeant who had seen me raising the flag one morning and wanted to express his support. Then came Marie Thompson, whose son was currently deployed in the Middle East. She had tears in her eyes when she told me how much it meant to her to see the flag flying in the neighborhood. By Sunday evening, I had met more of my neighbors than I had in the previous 6 months combined. What surprised me most was that many of them had their own complaints about Linda Patterson and the HOA board. Apparently, I was not the first person to run afoul of Linda's interpretation of the rules. There were stories of residents being fined for having the wrong shade of mailbox, for planting flowers that were not on the approved list, and for parking their cars in their own driveways for more than 2 hours during daylight. She tried to fine me $300 because my kid left his bicycle on the front lawn overnight, Bill told me, shaking his head. A kid's bicycle. I told her where she could stick her fine, and eventually she backed down, but only after I threatened to bring it up at a full HOA meeting. The woman is on a power trip. This information was valuable. It suggested that Linda's actions were not really about property values or HOA regulations. They were about control and her need to enforce her will on everyone around her. Monday morning brought another development. I was getting ready for work when I heard a vehicle pull up outside. Looking through the window, I saw a local news van parked on the street. A reporter and cameraman were setting up, and they appeared to be filming my flagpole. I walked outside, curious about what was happening. The reporter, a young woman with dark hair and a professional smile, approached me immediately. "Mr. Williams, I am Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 News. We heard about your situation with the HOA, and we would love to get your perspective on the story. Do you have a few minutes?" I hesitated. I had never been one to seek attention, and the idea of being on the news made me uncomfortable. But as I thought about it, I realized that public awareness might be exactly what I needed. If Linda Patterson wanted to fight about the American flag, maybe it was time for the community to know what was happening. "Sure," I said. "What do you want to know?" Jennifer asked me to explain the situation, and I gave her a straightforward account of Linda's complaint, the HOA's demand to remove the flagpole, and my refusal to comply. I showed her the violation notice and explained my 20 years of service in the Marines. When she asked me why the flag was so important to me, I felt my throat tighten slightly. This flag represents every person I served with, especially the ones who did not make it home. It represents the values that make this country worth defending. The idea that I could be fined or punished for displaying it in front of my own home is something I never imagined I would face after spending 2 decades protecting the freedom to do exactly that. Jennifer nodded sympathetically. Have you reached out to the HOA for comment? I have stated my position clearly. I am willing to discuss this at the next HOA meeting, but I am not taking down the flag. After the interview concluded, Jennifer mentioned that they would be reaching out to Linda Patterson for her side of the story. I almost felt sorry for Linda. Almost. The news segment aired that evening. I watched it at home, feeling strange seeing myself on television. The story was fair and presented both sides, though Linda's comments did her no favors. She had agreed to a brief interview, and in it, she insisted that the issue was not about patriotism, but about following rules and maintaining neighborhood standards. Every homeowner agreed to abide by our HOA regulations when they purchased their property, Linda said, her voice clipped and formal. Mr. Williams is not special. He does not get to ignore the rules just because he is a veteran. We all appreciate his service, but that does not give him the right to diminish property values for everyone else. The way she said it, with such cold dismissiveness, made me realize that she genuinely did not understand why people were upset. To her, this was purely a matter of regulations and control. The deeper meaning of the flag, the sacrifice it represented, seemed completely lost on her. My phone started ringing almost immediately after the segment ended. Friends from my unit, neighbors I had met over the weekend, and even a few strangers who had found my number somehow all called to express their support. Marcus called too, and he sounded jubilant. Derek, you just became the most famous veteran in Chattanooga. That news story is already being shared all over social media. I have had 15 people reach out asking how they can help. This is bigger than I even expected. I do not want it to be big, Marcus. I just want to keep my flag up. I know, brother. But sometimes the right fight at the right time catches fire. Trust me, this is a good thing. Linda Patterson is about to face some serious public scrutiny, and that is going to make it a lot harder for her to push you around. Marcus was right. Over the next few days, the story gained traction. Local social media groups erupted with discussions about the HOA, property rights, and respect for veterans. Some people defended Linda, arguing that rules were rules and that HOAs existed for good reasons. But they were vastly outnumbered by people who thought the whole thing was ridiculous. A few other news outlets picked up the story. A radio talk show invited me to discuss the situation, and while I declined, they spent a full hour talking about it anyway. The host, a conservative firebrand named Chuck Davidson, was particularly harsh on Linda, calling her the kind of petty tyrant who makes everyone hate HOAs. I tried to go about my normal life, going to work, maintaining my yard, and avoiding the growing circus around my house. But it was becoming increasingly difficult. Reporters occasionally showed up looking for updates. Neighbors stopped me constantly to ask how things were going. And every few days, I would find another notice from the HOA, each one more insistent than the last. The breaking point came 8 days before the scheduled HOA meeting. I arrived home from work to find that someone had vandalized my flagpole. The American flag had been torn down and thrown into my bushes, and the pole itself had been spray painted with the words "Remove IT" in bright red letters. I stood in my yard, staring at the desecrated flag in the bushes, and felt a rage unlike anything I had experienced in years. This was not just about HOA regulations anymore. Someone had deliberately destroyed a symbol that held profound meaning for me and millions of other Americans. Whoever did this had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. I carefully retrieved the flag from the bushes, inspecting it for damage. It was torn in several places, rendered unusable. I folded it as respectfully as I could, knowing I would need to dispose of it properly later. Then I pulled out my phone and called the police. Officer David Chen arrived within 20 minutes. He was a younger guy, probably in his early 30s, and he took the report seriously. He photographed the vandalized flagpole, collected the damaged flag as evidence, and asked me detailed questions about who might have done this. "You have any security cameras?" he asked. "No, I never thought I would need them in a quiet neighborhood like this." Officer Chen nodded. "Given the publicity around your situation, this is likely related to the HOA dispute. Do you suspect anyone specifically?" I wanted to say Linda Patterson's name. Every instinct told me she was involved, or at least knew who was. But I had no proof, and making accusations without evidence would only hurt my position. "I cannot say for certain," I replied, "but the timing seems pretty convenient." After Officer Chen left, I called Marcus and Tom. Both of them were furious. Marcus started talking about organizing a protest at Linda's house, which I had to talk him down from. Tom was more measured but equally angry. "This is destruction of property and potentially a hate crime given the nature of the flag," Tom said. "The police report is good. It establishes a pattern of escalating harassment. Derek, I think you should consider getting security cameras installed immediately. If whoever did this is bold enough to vandalize your property once, they might try again." I took his advice. The next day, I had a security system installed with cameras covering every angle of my front yard. The installation company, owned by another veteran, refused to charge me for the service once he heard what had happened. "Brothers take care of brothers," he said simply. "Anyone who would tear down an American flag deserves to be caught on camera." With the security system in place, I got a new flag and raised it on the repaired flagpole. This time, I also installed a light so the flag could be properly illuminated at night, as per flag etiquette. If Linda wanted to complain about that too, she was welcome to try. The vandalism incident brought even more attention to the situation. Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 did a follow-up story, and this time the tone was considerably more serious. Vandalism and potential hate crimes were a different matter than HOA disputes. The story prompted the chief of police to make a public statement saying that the department was investigating and took the incident very seriously. Social media went into overdrive. People were furious that someone would desecrate an American flag, regardless of their opinions on HOAs or property regulations. Local veterans groups started organizing more vocally. Marcus called me to say that he had confirmed at least 50 veterans who would be attending the HOA meeting to show their support. 50, I repeated. "Marcus, the HOA meeting room probably does not hold 50 people." "Then they better find a bigger room," Marcus said cheerfully. "Because we are all coming, and we are all going to have some things to say to Miss Linda Patterson." I was grateful for the support, but I was also starting to worry about how this was all spiraling. What had started as a simple dispute about a flagpole had become a full-blown community conflict. I did not want violence or threats. I just wanted the right to fly my flag. 3 days before the meeting, something unexpected happened. I received a phone call from a number I did not recognize. When I answered, a man identified himself as Robert Harrison, a member of the HOA board. "Mr. Williams, I want you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with how Linda has handled this situation," he said quietly. "There are 3 other board members besides Linda, and 2 of us have serious concerns about her approach. We wanted to reach out privately to let you know that we will be supporting your position at the meeting. This was news to me." "I appreciate that, Mr. Harrison. Can I ask why you did not speak up sooner?" he sighed. "Linda runs these board meetings with an iron fist. She has a way of shutting down dissent and making people feel like they are betraying the neighborhood if they question her. But this flag situation has gone too far. My father was a veteran, and I cannot in good conscience support forcing another veteran to take down an American flag. Neither can Sarah Chen, the other board member who agrees with me. What about the 4th board member? Patricia Morrison is Linda's best friend and will support whatever Linda wants. But with you, me, and Sarah on the same side, we have enough votes to overturn the violation and stop the fines." This was encouraging, but I was cautious. What happens at the meeting itself? Is there a process? Robert explained the HOA meeting structure. There would be an open forum where homeowners could speak, followed by board discussions and votes on various issues. My flag dispute was already on the agenda as a formal topic. "Be prepared for Linda to be aggressive," Robert warned. "She does not like losing, and she is going to make this as difficult as possible. But stick to the facts and the law. You have right on your side." The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing what I would say, how I would present my case. I reviewed all the documentation Tom had prepared and memorized the key points of the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act. I wanted to be prepared for every argument Linda could throw at me. Marcus called that evening to go over logistics. The veterans group had grown even larger than expected. Nearly 75 veterans had confirmed they would attend, along with family members and other supporters. The HOA had already announced they were moving the meeting to the community clubhouse instead of the usual small conference room, but even that space would be packed. "Derek, tomorrow is going to be intense," Marcus said, "but I want you to remember something. You are not alone. Every person showing up tomorrow is there because they believe in what you are doing. Linda Patterson is about to face the consequences of picking a fight with the wrong person." The day of the meeting arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, and a light breeze that kept my flag waving gently in front of my house. I put on a dress shirt and slacks, wanting to look professional and respectful. This was not about being confrontational. It was about standing firm on principle. I arrived at the community clubhouse 30 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to start and found that the parking lot was already nearly full. People were streaming into the building, many of them wearing Veterans Organization hats or shirts indicating their military service. I recognized Bill Henderson and Marie Thompson from my street, along with dozens of other faces I had seen around the neighborhood. Marcus met me at the entrance, greeting me with his characteristic bear hug. He was wearing his Marine Corps dress uniform, as were several other veterans. The sight of all those uniforms, representing every branch of the military, was almost overwhelming. "You ready for this?" Marcus asked. "As ready as I will ever be." We walked inside together, and I was struck by the sheer number of people packed into the clubhouse. Every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls. I estimated at least 150 people were present, maybe more. I spotted several news cameras set up in the back, including Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7. At the front of the room, a table was set up for the HOA board members. Linda Patterson sat in the center, flanked by the other 4 board members. She looked considerably less confident than she had when confronting me in my yard. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, Taking in the crowd of veterans and supporters, Robert Harrison caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod. Sarah Chen, a middle-aged Asian woman sitting to Linda's left, offered a small smile. Patricia Morrison, Linda's friend, looked as rigid and unwelcoming as Linda herself. The meeting was called to order at exactly 7 p.m. Linda banged a gavel on the table, though the sound was barely audible over the murmur of the crowd. "This meeting of the Oakwood Hills Homeowners Association is now in session," Linda announced, her voice tight. "We have a very full agenda tonight, so I ask that everyone please remain orderly and respectful." The first 30 minutes of the meeting were taken up with routine business, approval of previous meeting minutes, financial reports, and discussions about upcoming neighborhood events. The crowd grew restless, clearly waiting for the main event. Finally, Linda cleared her throat and addressed the elephant in the room. Item 7 on tonight's agenda concerns a violation notice issued to Derek Williams regarding an unpermitted flagpole installation. Mr. Williams, would you like to address the board? I stood up, aware that every eye in the room was on me. I walked to the front, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Derek Williams, and I am a 20-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. 6 months ago, I moved to this neighborhood seeking a peaceful place to live after dedicating 2 decades of my life to serving this country. I installed a flagpole in my front yard to display the American flag, something that holds deep personal and symbolic meaning for me and millions of other Americans." I paused, looking directly at Linda. I was subsequently informed by Mrs. Patterson that my flagpole violated HOA regulations and that I would be fined if I did not remove it. I researched the matter thoroughly and found that my flagpole complies with all local, state, and federal regulations. More importantly, the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 explicitly protects my right to display the flag regardless of HOA restrictions. Linda interrupted. "Mr. Williams, the act you are citing does not eliminate all HOA authority. We have the right to enforce reasonable restrictions on the time, place, and manner of flag displays." Tom Richardson stood up from the audience. "May I address the board? I am Tom Richardson, Mr. Williams's attorney. The reasonable restrictions you are referring to, Mrs. Patterson, typically apply to things like the size and condition of the flag, not to banning flag displays entirely. Mr. Williams's flagpole is 15 feet tall, which is standard for residential displays. The flag is properly maintained and lit according to flag etiquette. There is nothing unreasonable about his display." Linda's face was reddening. "The Architectural Review Committee was not consulted, which is a violation of our procedures regardless of flag protection laws." Robert Harrison spoke up, surprising Linda. "Linda, I have reviewed our HOA guidelines extensively this past week. Nowhere in our architectural review requirements does it specifically mention flagpoles or flag displays. The language talks about structural additions, paint colors, and landscaping. I do not believe we have grounds to claim Mr. Williams violated our review process." Linda turned to glare at Robert. "We voted on this as a board. Are you changing your position?" "I am reconsidering based on new information and legal research," Robert replied calmly. "That is what board members are supposed to do." Sarah Chen raised her hand. "I also have concerns about how this has been handled, and I think we need to address the vandalism that occurred at Mr. Williams's property. Does anyone on this board have information about that incident?" The room went silent. Linda's expression flickered with something I could not quite read. "I have no knowledge of any vandalism," she said stiffly. Marcus stood up, his imposing figure commanding attention. My name is Marcus Johnson, and I am the president of the Tennessee Veterans Alliance. I am here tonight with 75 of my fellow veterans to support Derek Williams. We find it deeply troubling that a man who served this country for 20 years is being harassed for flying the American flag. We find it even more troubling that his property was vandalized and the flag was torn down. I want to state clearly, for the record and for the cameras in this room, that the veterans community in Tennessee is watching how this board handles this situation. Applause erupted from the crowd. Linda banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Mr. Johnson, you are out of order. This is an HOA meeting for homeowners, not a public rally. Actually, Tom interjected, HOA meetings in Tennessee are required to allow homeowners to speak during open forum periods, and Mr. Williams has the right to invite guests to speak on his behalf. Additionally, given that this meeting was publicized and the clubhouse is community property, you cannot legally bar people from attending. Linda looked like she wanted to argue but seemed to realize she was on thin ice. Fine. Does anyone else wish to speak? What followed was nearly an hour of testimony from neighbors and veterans. Bill Henderson talked about his own experiences with Linda's overzealous enforcement of HOA rules. Marie Thompson spoke through tears about her deployed son and what the flag meant to military families. Veteran after veteran stood up to share their stories and express support for my right to display the flag. Several non-veterans also spoke in my favor, talking about property rights and the overreach of HOA boards. A few people did speak in support of Linda, mostly arguing that rules needed to be enforced consistently, but they were vastly outnumbered. Throughout all of this, Linda sat with her arms crossed, her expression growing increasingly hostile. When the open forum finally concluded, she addressed the board. I think we have heard enough opinions. The fact remains that Mr. Williams installed his flagpole without proper approval. The board voted to require its removal, and I see no reason to reverse that decision. I call for a new vote, Robert Harrison said immediately. Linda glared at him. That is not how this works, Robert. Actually, it is, Sarah Chen said. Any board member can call for a vote on any issue on the agenda. I second Robert's motion for a new vote. Tom stood up again. I would also like to point out that if this board votes to uphold the violation and assess fines, Mr. Williams will immediately file a lawsuit in civil court. Based on the precedents I have researched, you will lose that lawsuit, and the HOA will be liable for court costs and potentially damages for harassment. You will also face significant public relations damage given the media attention this case has already received. Linda looked around the table at her fellow board members. Patricia Morrison nodded in support, but Robert and Sarah both looked resolute. The fifth board member, an older man named George Fletcher who had been silent all evening, cleared his throat. Linda, I think we need to cut our losses here. This has become a bigger issue than anyone anticipated, and I do not want the HOA involved in expensive litigation over a flagpole. I am going to vote to rescind the violation. Linda's face went pale. She had lost control of her own board. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. Let us vote. All in favor of rescinding the violation notice against Derek Williams. Robert, Sarah, and George all raised their hands. Only Linda and Patricia voted against. The motion passed 3-2. The room erupted in cheers and applause. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I had not realized was so heavy. It was over. I could keep my flag, but Linda was not done yet. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is a disgrace. This board has been intimidated and manipulated by outside pressure and media attention. You are all making a terrible mistake." "Linda," Robert said quietly, "the only mistake was targeting a veteran's flag in the first place. You made this personal when it should have been handled with common sense and compassion." Jennifer Martinez approached the table with her camera crew. "Mrs. Patterson, would you like to make a statement for our viewers?" Linda looked at the camera, and I saw something shift in her expression. Maybe it was the realization of how bad this looked. Maybe it was the sea of veterans staring at her with disappointment and anger. Whatever it was, some of the fight seemed to drain out of her. "I want to be clear that I have nothing but respect for veterans and their service," she said stiffly. "This was never about the flag itself, but about following proper procedures. However, I accept the board's decision to rescind the violation." It was not an apology, but it was the closest thing to a concession I was likely to get. The meeting concluded shortly after, and I was immediately surrounded by people wanting to shake my hand and offer their congratulations. Marcus pulled me into another hug, practically lifting me off the ground. "You did it, brother. You stood your ground and won." I smiled, but I was also exhausted. The stress of the past 2 weeks had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. All I wanted was to go home and sit on my porch with a beer, looking at my flag waving in the breeze. As people began to file out of the clubhouse, Robert Harrison approached me. "Mr. Williams, I want to apologize for how this was handled. Linda had us convinced this was a straightforward architectural review issue. I should have done my own research sooner." "I appreciate you speaking up when it mattered," I replied, shaking his hand. Sarah Chen joined us. "I also want to apologize, and I want you to know that several of us are planning to call for Linda's removal as HOA president. What happened here tonight showed that she is not fit to lead this board." I nodded but did not comment. Linda Patterson's fate with the HOA was not my concern. I just wanted peace. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The news coverage of the meeting had been extensive, with multiple outlets running stories about the HOA backing down. Social media was full of positive comments and support. Several national news sites had even picked up the story, though I tried not to read too many of those. I had never wanted to be famous, even for a good cause. What I was not prepared for was what happened 3 days after the meeting. I was working in my garage when I heard vehicles pulling up outside. Looking out, I saw multiple police cars parked on the street. Officer Chen was walking up my driveway with another officer I did not recognize. "Mr. Williams, do you have a moment?" Officer Chen asked. My stomach dropped. Had something else happened? "Of course, what is going on? We made an arrest this morning in connection with the vandalism of your flagpole. I wanted to inform you personally." "An arrest? Who?" Officer Chen glanced at his partner before answering. "Patricia Morrison, the HOA board member. Your security cameras caught footage of her vehicle in your neighborhood on the night of the vandalism. And when we executed a search warrant, we found red spray paint in her garage that matches what was used on your flagpole. We also found pieces of fabric that appear to be from your flag." I was stunned. Patricia Morrison, Linda Patterson's best friend on the board. Did she say why she did it? She claims she was trying to help resolve the situation by scaring you into removing the flag voluntarily. She said Mrs. Patterson was under a lot of stress and she wanted to help. Of course, that does not excuse the criminal behavior. She has been charged with vandalism, trespassing, and desecration of a venerated object. After the officers left, I sat down on my porch steps, trying to process this information. Patricia had destroyed my flag thinking it would help Linda. The whole thing was insane. These were grown adults who had become so invested in a petty HOA dispute that one of them had committed crimes. The arrest made local news, adding another chapter to the saga that I desperately wanted to end. Marcus called to tell me the veterans group was pleased that justice was being served, but I just felt tired. Tired of the conflict, tired of being in the news, tired of my quiet neighborhood being anything but quiet. 2 days after Patricia's arrest, something happened that I did not expect. I was leaving for work when I saw Linda Patterson standing at the end of my driveway. She looked terrible, like she had not slept in days. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, and her eyes were red. "Mr. Williams, can I talk to you for a moment?" Her voice was small, nothing like the aggressive tone she had used before. I hesitated but nodded. "What is it, Linda?" She took a deep breath. "I want to apologize. Really apologize, not the hollow statement I made at the meeting. I was wrong. I was so focused on enforcing rules and maintaining what I thought was neighborhood standards that I completely lost sight of what actually matters. Your flag, your service, the meaning behind what you were doing. I dismissed all of it because I was too wrapped up in my own need for control." I studied her face, looking for signs that this was some kind of manipulation, but all I saw was genuine regret. "I had no idea Patricia would do what she did," Linda continued. "When I found out she vandalized your property, I was horrified. I have had to do a lot of thinking this past week about who I have become and what kind of person I want to be. I have submitted my resignation as HOA president. I cannot continue in that role after everything that has happened. Linda, I appreciate you coming here to say this. I really do. But you have to understand how much damage was done. It was not just about the flag or the HOA rules. You made me feel unwelcome in my own home, in my own neighborhood. After spending 20 years defending this country, I came home to that." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I know. And I am so sorry. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I understand how wrong I was." We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, Linda spoke again. "Would you be willing to let me apologize on camera?" Jennifer Martinez asked if I would do an interview, and I think I owe it to you and to the community to own my mistakes publicly. I was surprised by the request. Linda had always seemed too proud to admit fault so openly. "If you think it is the right thing to do, then yes. But I do not want any more drama, Linda. I just want to live my life. I understand. Thank you for hearing me out." She turned and walked back to her house, and I stood watching her go. I did not know if Linda Patterson's change of heart was genuine or just a response to public pressure and her friend's arrest. But I chose to take her at her word. People could change, and sometimes it took a major crisis to force that change. The interview aired 2 days later. Jennifer Martinez sat down with Linda in what appeared to be Linda's living room. I watched it at home, curious about what Linda would say. "Mrs. Patterson, thank you for agreeing to this interview," Jennifer began. "You have been at the center of a controversy regarding Derek Williams's American flag. What do you want people to know?" Linda looked directly at the camera, her expression serious. "I want to apologize to Derek Williams and to everyone who was affected by my actions. I was wrong. I let my position as HOA president go to my head, and I prioritized rules and regulations over basic human decency and respect for someone who served our country. Mr. Williams had every right to display the American flag, and I should have recognized that immediately." "What do you think motivated your initial response?" Jennifer asked. Linda paused, clearly choosing her words carefully. "I think I had become so invested in controlling every aspect of the neighborhood that I lost perspective. I convinced myself that I was protecting property values and maintaining standards, but really I was just exercising power because I could. It took this entire situation, the community backlash, the media attention, seeing veterans come out in force to support Mr. Williams, to make me realize what I had become. "Do you have anything you want to say directly to Mr. Williams?" Linda looked at the camera again. "Derek, I am deeply sorry for the stress and pain I caused you. You deserved better, especially after your service to this country. I hope that someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you cannot. I am resigning as HOA president, and I am committed to being a better neighbor and a better person going forward." The interview continued for a few more minutes, with Linda discussing Patricia Morrison's arrest and expressing shock and dismay at what her friend had done. She was careful not to excuse Patricia's actions, but acknowledged that her own behavior had created an environment where Patricia felt compelled to take extreme measures. When the interview ended, I sat back on my couch, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. Linda's apology had seemed genuine, and her willingness to admit fault publicly took courage. But the damage had been done, and our neighborhood would never quite be the same. Over the following weeks, life slowly returned to normal. Patricia Morrison's criminal case moved through the court system, and she eventually pled guilty to vandalism charges. She was sentenced to community service, probation, and ordered to pay restitution for the damaged flag and the cost of my security system installation. Linda kept her word and resigned as HOA president. Robert Harrison was elected to replace her, and one of his first acts was to propose amendments to the HOA guidelines explicitly protecting residents' rights to display American flags and other patriotic symbols. The amendments passed unanimously at the next homeowners meeting. The media attention faded, though I occasionally still got recognized when I was out in town. People would thank me for standing up to the HOA or tell me their own stories about dealing with overzealous homeowners associations. I always listened politely, but I never felt like I had done anything particularly heroic. I had just wanted to fly my flag. Marcus and the Tennessee Veterans Alliance used the publicity to advocate for stronger protections for veterans' rights at the state level. They worked with legislators to introduce a bill that would provide additional legal safeguards for flag displays and create penalties for HOAs that violated those protections. The bill was still working its way through the state legislature, but Marcus was optimistic about its chances. Tom Richardson and I remained friends, though thankfully I did not need his legal services anymore. He did tell me that the HOA situation had generated interest in his practice, and several other homeowners dealing with similar disputes had reached out for representation. As for Linda Patterson, I saw her around the neighborhood occasionally. We would exchange polite nods but did not really interact beyond that. I heard through the grapevine that she had gotten involved in volunteer work at a local veterans center, which suggested that maybe her apology and stated desire to change had been genuine. I hoped that was true. People deserve the chance to grow and improve, even after making serious mistakes. My neighbors became friendlier after everything settled down. Bill Henderson and I started a weekly poker game with a few other veterans in the area. Marie Thompson's son came home from deployment safe, and she invited me over for a welcome home dinner. I met more people, formed more connections, and gradually the neighborhood started to feel like home in a way it had not before all the drama. The flag still flies in front of my house every day. I raise it at sunrise and lower it at sunset, following proper flag etiquette just like I was taught in the Marines. Every time I look at it waving in the breeze, I think about the brothers I lost, the values I fought to defend, and the bizarre series of events that turned a simple flagpole into a community controversy. I also think about the fact that standing up for what you believe in, even when it is difficult, matters. I could have taken the path of least resistance, removed the flagpole, and avoided all the conflict. But that flag represented something too important to compromise on. Sometimes you have to draw a line and refuse to cross it, regardless of the consequences. The whole experience taught me something about my new community too. For all the initial conflict and drama, when it came down to it, the vast majority of people supported doing the right thing. The veterans who showed up at that HOA meeting, the neighbors who spoke in my defense, the strangers who reached out with messages of support, they all reinforced my faith in people's basic decency. There were still HOA meetings, still discussions about neighborhood issues and regulations. But the tone had changed. Robert Harrison ran the board meetings with fairness and common sense, soliciting input from homeowners and being transparent about decisions. The association still had rules, but they were enforced reasonably, with an understanding that the point of a neighborhood association should be to build community, not to control every minor detail of people's lives. One Saturday afternoon, about 2 months after everything had concluded, I was working in my yard when a car pulled up. An elderly man got out, wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap. He walked up to me with a slight limp, extending his hand. "Derek Williams. My name is Frank Morrison. I just wanted to shake your hand and thank you." I shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip despite his age. "Thank you for your service, sir. What brings you by?" "I read about your situation with the HOA. Made me proud to see a young veteran standing up for the flag like you did. I served in Vietnam, and I have seen too many people treat the flag like it is just a piece of cloth. What you did mattered. You reminded people what it means." We talked for a while, sharing stories about our respective service experiences. Frank told me about losing friends in Vietnam and coming home to a country that did not appreciate their sacrifice. I told him about my deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, the challenges of modern warfare, and the brothers I had lost. Despite the decades between our service, we spoke the same language, understood the same bonds. Before he left, Frank saluted my flag. "Keep it flying, son. Keep it flying." I stood in my yard long after he drove away, looking at the flag and thinking about everything that had happened. From Linda Patterson's initial complaint to the HOA meeting showdown to Patricia Morrison's arrest to Linda's public apology. It had been a wild ride that I never wanted to repeat. But standing there in the afternoon sun, watching the stars and stripes wave against the clear Tennessee sky, I knew it had all been worth it. This was not just about my right to display a flag. It was about respect, about honoring the sacrifices of everyone who had ever worn the uniform, and about standing firm on principles even when facing pressure to back down. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Barbecue at my place next Saturday. Bring beer. No HOA drama allowed." I smiled and texted back my confirmation. Life was good. The flag was flying, and I was finally, truly home. The evening brought a beautiful sunset, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. I sat on my porch with a cold beer, just like I had dreamed of doing when I first moved to this neighborhood. The flag was illuminated by the spotlight I had installed, standing proud and bright against the darkening sky. A car slowed down in front of my house, and I recognized Jennifer Martinez behind the wheel. She waved, and I waved back. She had called a few days ago asking if I wanted to do a follow-up story about life after the controversy, but I had politely declined. The story was over. It was time to just live my life. As the stars came out, I thought about all the men and women who had served alongside me, the ones who made it home and the ones who did not. I thought about the Marines who had become my family, the bonds forged in combat that would never break. And I thought about what it meant to be a veteran in America, navigating civilian life after dedicating years to military service. The flag represented all of that. It was not just a symbol. It was a reminder of sacrifice, of duty, of values that transcended politics and personal disputes. Linda Patterson had eventually come to understand that, though it took a painful journey to get there. Patricia Morrison had let her misguided loyalty lead her to criminal behavior. But in the end, the community had come together to protect what mattered. I finished my beer and went inside, but not before standing at attention and rendering a proper salute to the flag. It was something I did every evening, a private ritual that connected me to my past service and to all the other veterans who had done the same throughout American history. The next morning started like any other. Coffee on the porch, checking my phone, planning out my day, but something felt different, lighter somehow. The weight of the conflict was truly gone now. The flag flew without controversy. My neighbors were friendly. Life had found its rhythm. Bill Henderson walked by with his dog and stopped to chat. "Hey Derek, you coming to poker on Thursday? Would not miss it. Good. I am ready to win back the money you took from me last week." He grinned and continued on his walk. Marie Thompson drove past and honked, giving me a cheerful wave. Her son, home from deployment, was visible in the passenger seat. They were building a life together again, making up for lost time. Even Linda Patterson emerged from her house to water her flowers. We made eye contact across the street, and she offered a small smile. I nodded back. We would probably never be friends, but we could coexist peacefully. And that was enough. Work that day was busy but satisfying. I had found a good job with a construction company that valued my military experience and work ethic. My coworkers knew about the flag situation, of course. Everyone in Chattanooga seemed to know about it, but they treated me normally. I was just Derek, the guy who did good work and did not complain. During lunch, I checked my phone and saw a message from Marcus. "Legislature is voting on the Veterans Flag Protection Bill next week. Looks like it's going to pass. We did good, brother." That news made me smile. If something positive could come from all the drama, if other veterans would be protected from similar harassment, then the whole ordeal had served a purpose beyond my individual situation. The weeks turned into months. Spring arrived, bringing warm weather and blooming flowers throughout the neighborhood. The HOA organized a community barbecue, and for the first time, I actually attended. Robert Harrison had worked hard to transform the association from Linda Patterson's personal fiefdom into an actual community organization, and it showed in the turnout and the friendly atmosphere. I found myself talking with neighbors I had never really met before, sharing stories and jokes, feeling genuinely part of something. This was what I had been looking for when I left the Marines, a place to belong, a community to be part of. It had taken a fight to get here, but I had arrived. The Tennessee Veterans Alliance continued to grow and advocate for veterans' issues. Marcus invited me to speak at a few events, sharing my story and encouraging other veterans to stand up for their rights. I was not naturally comfortable with public speaking, but I did it anyway because it mattered. At one event, a young veteran approached me afterward. He was maybe 25, recently separated from the Army and dealing with an HOA issue similar to mine. "Your story gave me the courage to fight back," he said. "I was ready to just take down my flag and avoid the hassle, but if you could stand up to them, so can I." I gave him Tom Richardson's contact information and offered to help however I could. Watching him walk away with renewed determination reminded me why the whole fight had been worthwhile. Summer brought hot weather and long evenings. I spent them on my porch, often with friends from the neighborhood or fellow veterans. We would drink beer, tell stories, and watch the flag wave in the breeze. These were the moments I had dreamed about during deployments, simple, peaceful evenings with nothing more pressing than deciding what to grill for dinner. Patricia Morrison's legal case concluded with her completing her community service at, ironically enough, a veterans center. I heard she had actually done good work there and had gained a new appreciation for what veterans dealt with. I hoped that was true. Redemption was always possible for those willing to do the work. The news cycle moved on to other stories, other controversies. My 15 minutes of fame ended, and I could not have been happier about it. I was just a guy with a flag in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that was exactly how I wanted it. On the 4th of July, the neighborhood organized a parade and celebration. I was asked to carry the American flag at the front of the parade, and I agreed. Walking down the familiar streets with that flag in my hands, surrounded by neighbors and fellow veterans, felt like a culmination of everything that had happened. Children waved little flags from the sidewalks. Veterans saluted. Regular citizens put their hands over their hearts. And at one point, I saw Linda Patterson standing with the crowd, her hand over her heart, tears streaming down her face. Whatever demons she had been wrestling with, whatever personal growth she had undergone, it was real. I could see it in her expression. After the parade, there were speeches and festivities in the community park. Marcus spoke about the importance of protecting veterans' rights. Robert Harrison talked about community and coming together despite differences. And I was asked to say a few words, which I kept brief. I never wanted to be famous for standing up to an HOA, I began, getting a laugh from the crowd. I just wanted to fly my flag in peace. But what happened taught me something important. When you stand up for your principles, when you refuse to back down on what matters, people will support you. This community proved that. The veterans who showed up at that meeting proved that. All of you proved that. So thank you. Thank you for having my back, and thank you for reminding me what America is really about. The applause was warm and genuine. As I stepped away from the microphone, several veterans came up to shake my hand or share a quick word of encouragement. I felt, for perhaps the first time since leaving the Marines, truly at home. The evening ended with fireworks over the park. I stood watching them explode in brilliant colors against the dark sky, my flag furled and cradled in my arms. Beside me stood Marcus, Bill Henderson, Marie Thompson and her son, and dozens of other neighbors and friends who had become part of my new civilian family. "Hell of a year," Marcus said quietly. "Hell of a year," I agreed. As the final fireworks faded and the crowd began to disperse, I walked home through the familiar streets. My house came into view, and there was my flagpole, standing exactly where it had been through all the drama and conflict. Tomorrow morning, I would raise the flag again, just like I did every morning. And it would wave freely, protected by law and by a community that had chosen to do the right thing. I climbed the steps to my porch and turned to look back at the neighborhood. Lights were on in houses up and down the street. People were settling in for the night, comfortable and secure in their homes. This was what I had fought for during 20 years in the Marines. Not just the big abstract concepts of freedom and democracy, but the simple reality of people living their lives in peace. The flag would fly tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. There would be no more HOA complaints, no more violation notices, no more drama. Just a veteran, a flag, and a community that understood what both represented. As I went inside and locked the door behind me, I felt a sense of completion that I had been seeking since leaving military service. The transition from Marine to civilian had been difficult, full of adjustments and challenges. But standing up for my flag, fighting for what mattered, and ultimately winning with the support of my community had given me something invaluable. It had given me purpose, connection, and the knowledge that the values I had defended overseas still meant something here at home. The American flag flying in my front yard was not just a symbol. It was a promise, a reminder, and a testament to everyone who had ever served. And tomorrow morning, when the sun rose over Chattanooga, Tennessee, I would be on my porch with my coffee, ready to raise that flag one more time. Not because I had to, not because I was making a statement, but because it was the right thing to do. That was enough. That was everything.